Okay, so I thought I would use this particular chart right now, just because it's such a good specific question, and it gives us an interesting example of a few different things that we have been looking at prior, and also because talking for me is always easier than writing, and I was going to end up writing a huge tome to this person, and I'd rather just send them a link to this fucking video. Okay, so the question was, what are the indications of delayed marriage, or rather of a late marriage in my chart, please? Right. And note as always, I'm always talking about how we can tell from the language used what's going on, because what's going on, and of course the please at the end says to me this person is polite, and the politeness is usually a Libra, a Libran trait or a Venusian trait of some sort, and sure enough Libra is rising. Then, and of course, it's also a love-related question, right? And Libra is ruled by Venus, and we know Libra also has a problem with being on its own. Generally, even though we're just talking about an ascendant sign at the particular moment, and with this Venus almost angular, or relatively, basically angular, right? Within 5 degrees of the midheaven, so we would basically go ahead and give her to the midheaven, or give her to the 10th house, and so we know that her issues are being pushed forward. Her issues are advancing, right? Anything that's in the 10th or the 11th, or the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th, and 2, 5th, 8th, and 11th, those things are in a state of advancement. So we know in this particular chart, this is one of the only, or one of the many, rather, not only, sorry, Venus, Moon, Mercury, Sun, and which is going to be an important one, and then Saturn. Those are the planets that are all pushing forward or advancing in this chart, right? So whatever, as far as either their house placement or their natural significations, those are the things that are going to be pushed forward. So we know that since Venus is within 5 degrees of the midheaven, that she's pushing forward, she's trying to advance her agenda, and her agenda is specifically the first and the eighth. So it's life, right? The first house is the house of life, but this person is asking about marriage, which is the seventh house. So what I thought was really interesting was how specific the question was, and then how specific the chart was in response, or not in response, but in reflection. Because this person asked specifically about late marriage, right? Late, not delay. I keep saying late, delay, late. But of course, late means delayed, right? And so we know that the planet that rules lateness and delays and slowness is Saturn. So of course, I was looking for something to happen with Saturn. So we see that the 20th degree of Aries is rising, right? It's at 1915. So it just missed the exaltation degree, by the way, right? Because the 19th degree is the exaltation degree of Aries. And of course, that's from 18 degrees in 1 minute to 19 degrees in 0 minutes. So this is now in the 20th degree. So the 20th degree of Aries is rising. And what I thought was really interesting about this was, this is an example, in my opinion, especially with this question in mind, of Al-Mubtazz slash Al-Mutin slash Victor, right? So as we know, the system of, I'm going to actually share something different here so that the person I'm doing it for, besides ourselves, of course, can understand. So we know there's a term called essential dignity, and essential dignity refers to two things. It first refers to the strength, intrinsic strength of a planet based on the sign in which it is, in which it occupies. So for instance, the sun in Leo, like that chart that we just are going to be working with right now in this video, sun in Leo is a sun in its domicile, and so thus it is considered strong. If the sun were in Libra or Aquarius, then it would be considered in detriment or fall, right? And so then we wouldn't have that particular thing going on. That would be the opposite, right? It would be weak. It would be considered weakened by essential. It would be essentially debilitated, is actually, if the sun were in Libra or Aquarius. When the sun is in Aries, which is going to be relevant, and Leo, then the sun is essentially dignified. So that's the first way of looking at essential dignity. The second way of looking at essential dignities is via this chart. And so there are 5 essential dignities: domicile, exaltation, triplicity, term or bound, and face. And as you can see, each has a diminishing number of points connected to it. So domicile gets 5 points. So when the sun is in Leo, for instance, which is its domicile, he gets 5 points. Exaltation 4. So when the sun is in Aries, right, he gets 4 points. Triplicity, term, etc. And phase. So the triplicity is another word for element, as you can see up here, elements, right? And so there are 3 planets that rule each element, and one is the primary ruler by day, and one is the primary ruler by night. And then we've got the 5 terms. So they are 5 unequal measurements of the 30-degree sign, right? And so with each of the 5 wandering stars, not the 2 lights, the sun and the moon, but the 5 wandering stars owns the terms, right? Owns each of the terms. So we can see here from 0 to 6 Jupiter, from 6 to 12 Venus, etc. Then we've got this issue called face here. And that's basically what we know as decans. So the first 10th, the second 10th, and the third. All right. So when a planet, so let's say Mars is, the sun is, rather, let's say Venus is at 21 degrees of Aries. That would put her, that means that she would be in the sign, that particular degree, she would be in her face, which would give her 1 point. Get it? And so when the sun is in Leo, he gets 5 points. When Mars is in Aries, he gets 5 points. Got it? So what we can also do is we can scan all of the planets who rule a particular degree. Right. And so we know that in this particular chart we're looking at, the 20th degree of Aries is on the cusp of the 7th. So we're going to look and see there are potentially 5 planets that can be the most, that can rather have rulership in that degree. So in the 20th degree, during the day, right, it's a daytime chart, we're going to go back to in a second, Mars has the domicile. The sun has the exaltation and the triplicity because it's daytime and fire. It's the 20th degree, so we're not quite over 2000, right? So Mercury has the term, and then sun has the face. So that means that there, even though there are potentially 5 planets that could rule this particular degree, there are really only 3: the Mars, the sun, and Mercury, right? And Mars has 5 points, right? Because he's the domicile ruler. Mercury gets 2 points, or actually lately I've been using 3, and we'll talk about that in our classes. Mercury gets three points, right? And then, or 2 points, and triplicity gets 3 points or 2 points. So I've been switching them, but we'll talk about that later. So that means that even though the domicile ruler, Mars, gets 5 points, the sun gets 4 plus 7 plus 3 equals 7 plus 2 equals 9 plus 1 equals 10. I mean, I'm sorry, 4 plus 3 plus, so it's a 4 plus 3 plus 1, 8, right? So Mars has 5 points. He's the domicile ruler, but the sun is actually the winner. The sun actually wins all the points, right? Or most of the points. He basically is the winner. So going back to this chart, I need to kind of make that clear because I'm going to use this. Going back to this chart, then we see that Mars, the domicile ruler, is already in the sign of his detriment, which is Libra, and in the 12th house, which is, we know, is one of the more malefic houses in the chart. And it's a place, one of the terms that I use for it is disappointments, right? Because it's the joy of Saturn, and Saturn also is disappointments, right? So it can disappointment, delay, disappointment, feeling cut off from things, right? And so the ruler of the 7th house, the domicile ruler, who gets 5 points, he's already in detriment and in the 12th house. All right, so that's one thing that gives us an idea of what's going on. The Venus herself doesn't really, right? She's pretty much up there, ready to be loved, right? She's the goddess of love. She's ready to be loved, etc. But really, what we do see is that this Mars is not in the best of condition by either sign or house. And the moon has just left him, right, as well. So the moon has just left the sextile of Mars. So she's separating. There was no reception in that sextile, right? And so, but the thing that I really wanted to come to, and like I said, I'm doing this for y'all, my students, but I'm also doing this for the person I kind of needed to go through that stuff that you already know. But what really interested me the most was the fact that we know that triplicity is another word for element, but it's also a way of dividing the significations of a house, right? And we know that the first triplicity ruler of the seventh house is the marriage, the second triplicity ruler of the seventh house is contentions, and the third is partnerships. It's daytime, so the sun is the first triplicity ruler of the seventh house. And also, we've just established that the sun is the Almut. So that means then that the sun on some level, and look at the condition of the sun. The sun's in his own sign, and he's on the cusp of the 11th, right? So he's in the 11th house. So we already know then that this sun, as far as Aries is concerned, what planet is going to have a stronger effect is really going to be the sun. I mean, Mars is going to obviously have an effect as the domicile ruler, but the sun is going to it's going to shine out somehow, right? It's going to shine out somehow. And so now, if indeed that's the case, why wouldn't the sun be a cross indication or a corrective for the Mars, right? Because that's what we would necessarily expect if the Mars, right? We see the domicile rulers in the 12th house and fucked over, right? Why wouldn't the sun in this particular case? Why wouldn't that actually be a corrective for it if we were using it as the Almutant? And of course, now we come to why. Because the sun is opposing Saturn, who we already talked about represents delays and slowings downs, etc. And even though Saturn is strong in his own sign, he's retrograde, so he's going to act in an unpredictable manner. He's going to act in a less constructive manner. He's going to act in a retrogressive manner. So I wouldn't be surprised even if there might have been an engagement that was turned, that got turned around in this chart, or that I've gotten almost to the point, but then something happens, or they might be finally experiencing marriage after a long time. So they said late marriage. So I mean, 28 isn't that late. This person is this person is maybe 30. So that's not that late. I mean, it's not like, I met a woman who got married at 48 for her first time. So that's a fucking late marriage. But certainly there can be a delay. Now, the other thing that we can look at to see about the delay, and this, in my opinion, that's what this really showed. And then, of course, you all are going to say, oh, and look at the retrograde Saturn means it's a what? It's a return of virtue, which is when planet A is applying to planet B, and planet B is either combust or retrograde. And so planet B says, no, thank you, I'm not going to be able to help you with the management of this particular house. Now, in this particular case, it's the 5th and the 11th specifically where it's going, right? It's the 5th and 11th is specifically what it's referring to, right? Sun is the ruler of the 11th, Saturn is the ruler of the 5th. However, the sun is the exaltation ruler of the seventh house, and Saturn is the exaltation ruler of the ascendant, right? Venus is the chart ruler herself, right? So this is a naturally Venusian person already, but on the second level of exaltation rulership, we see that there's Sun who becomes the exaltation ruler of the 7th, and Saturn who becomes the exaltation ruler of the 1st, right, or the ascendant, and both of them are stronger than the actual domicile rulers, right? So Venus is in Cancer, which is her triplicity, but that's about it. Let's see if her term, so she's in the 17th of Cancer. No, so that's Mercury's term and Mercury's phase. So no, so she's basically, all she's got is triplicity in that, and that's a pretty negligible dignity, right? And so, and that, as far as that's concerned, so she's not weak, but she's not super strong. She's not like the Mars, right? Who's kind of a little bit fucked over, but she is not super strong. She's fine, but she's not super strong. The sun is super strong, right? The sun is in his own domicile and whatever, right? But at the same time, he's impeded by the opposition to Saturn. And Saturn is also retrograde, and Saturn, as we just mentioned, is the exaltation ruler of the ascendant, who is stronger then the ruler of the ascendant. The sun is stronger than the ruler of the seventh, and the Saturn is stronger than the ruler of the ascendant. They are both exaltation rulers. And that return of virtue, when the sun says, oh, hey, I'm acting as proxy for the seventh house ruler. Do you want to help me with that? And of course, it's already by opposition, which is difficult. Saturn says, hey, I'm working for as exaltation ruler for the ascendant, for the person themselves, and I say no, thank you. I say no, I don't think I'm going to be able to help you with that, right? So that already, I mean, fifth and 11th house says, my dreams of having children might be delayed as well, right? So this person may have had dreams. I mean, with Saturn and then the fifth, they might be child free. They might not be interested in children at all. And then with the sun and the, sun is in a sterile sign. Saturn is ruler of the fifth and the fifth, but it could be, or my dreams get in the way of the idea of having children, right? Because sun is the 11th, my dreams, the Saturn is the fifth, the possibility of starting a family, right? So already the opposition is going to create a loggerhead situation with the fifth and the 11th, but it's also doing it. My point is that it's also doing it with the seventh and the first. And I think that's all I wanted to say. No, actually, I have one more thing. So the last thing I wanted to do is I wanted to, so this person's asking why late, right? And so we can use the triplicity rulers of not just to talk about different aspects of the house, but the first, second, and third parts of life. So going like birth to 28, 28 to 57, and 57 to birth. And so note that it's fire on the cusp of the seventh, which would put Saturn, which would be Sun for the first triplicity, Jupiter for the second, and Saturn for the third. So already this person's over 28, and we can see that it didn't probably happen during that first 28 years, right? There's the Sun Saturn opposition, right? Once again, acting. Why didn't the Sun act as a corrective? It's because it was opposed just as powerfully by a retrograde Saturn, right? And so it didn't happen there. So 28, it's with this Jupiter, who would technically be in the 12th, but we know that in the medieval period, sometimes they gave as much as 8 degrees leeway to before the ascendant for that. So even though he's in the 12th, he's in the sign of the first, so is Mars, right? Mars is in the sign of the first too, and that's not helping. But I think maybe a little bit quasi closer proximity to the cusp of the first might make this Jupiter a little bit more useful to for it, and also it's receiving the sextile from Mercury as well, and so that's not that necessarily helpful. Mercury rules the 9th and the 12th, right? So not necessarily helpful. But and then Saturn rules the third triplicity and comes back to this opposition. So I would imagine that if it's going to happen at all, it probably happens between 28 and 57, or 28 and 58. And which of course seems to be making rather they said late, not delayed, right? So it sounds like it may have happened, but it didn't happen until recently, or it may be about to happen, or something of that nature. So we'll see. So thank you.